Welcome back to Zero Sum Gaming here at the Culture Cache. Jenny B left us a post on Patreon. She wants to see Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, the arcade game. If you've got a request for Zero Sum Gaming or any other show at the Culture Cache, head on over to Patreon with a link in the description. You can tell us all about it there and we'll make it happen. Now, let's check out the game.
Time for a quick history lesson. In the late 80s and early 90s, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were at the height of their popularity. Everybody who was anybody was a fan, and hopefully they still are. I know I certainly fit the bill. When I was young, for my 7th birthday, my parents drove us to the big city so I could have one of my birthdays at Showbiz Pizza. That's the predecessor to what you whippersnappers call Chuck E. Cheese today. I was quite young, and honestly, the main thing I remember is that they had Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in the arcade. I'm grateful I don't remember how much money I shoved into the machine that night. Fast forward to December of 1990, when the home adaptation of the arcade game became available. Yes, like any good kid at the time, I had to have it. Over the years, I've actually claimed each of the 4 turtles as my favorite, and even now, I'm hard-pressed to choose one. Ultra games? Who are those guys? We have to have another history lesson here. Back in the NES days, Nintendo had a strict limit on the number of games that third-party publishers could release each year. By restricting each company to a maximum of 5 games a year, Nintendo sought to implicitly increase the quality of each game released on its system. Konami wanted to release more than 5 games per year, so they created Ultra Games, which was a wholly owned subsidiary of Konami. When Nintendo eventually eased up on this policy, there was no reason to keep Ultra around, so Konami dissolved it in 1992. The game is based on the first 5 episodes of the cartoon series. This was originally designed as a mini-series and has since become known as the first season of the show. This is abundantly clear since we see white Baxter Stockman and he's in human form. The fact that he is white proves the game is based on the cartoon, as he was black in the original comics. This also shows that it must be the first season, since he is in human form. By the time the NES version debuted, the 2nd season of the cartoon had already run, so Baxter's fly form is available as an NES exclusive boss. One of the new levels uses the weather control device from episode 4, and the banter between the bosses and the turtles in the arcade game is either lifted from or adapted from various episodes of the first season. Also, Shredder's retro mutagen ray he uses is the last boss of the game. He one-shots you if you get hit by it, but it's also his weapon in the final episode of Season 1. As far as home versions of games from 1990 go, this is a pretty good one. If you've never played the original arcade game, it's a brawler. If you've ever played Final Fight or The Simpsons, you have a good idea what to expect. In fact, the latter was commonly converted from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles back then. Brawlers have a reputation for being mindless games, but they do force you to pay attention for the entirety of the game. Every random mook is a threat. If each one gets in even a single hit on you, you won't last very long. It's for this reason that you must be familiar with all your own moves and abilities, as well as those of your enemy. As I mentioned, this is a game I grew up with. The older of my 2 younger sisters would often accompany me. She usually played as Michelangelo and readily employed the mash the attack button approach. Remember how I said that thing about each mook getting a shot in on you? That will happen often if you only stick to your regular attack. She was quick to play the game with me, and for that, I was always grateful. But my helpful, shall we say, coaching was not always well received. She also learned pretty quickly that if she depleted her lives, she could always steal one of mine. This can actually lead to some competing goals in a game like this. Are you playing just to have a good time, or are you playing to see the game through to its conclusion? If you're just playing to have fun, then all bets are off. But if you want to actually beat the game, you'd be surprised at some of the subtle complexities this game and this genre hold. Here's a paradoxical example. Beat-em-ups like this one try to rush you forward constantly. Indeed, there's often even a hidden timer that will simply outright kill you if you fail to move on. This harkens back to arcade days, where death meant ponying up another quarter to keep playing. It's rarely a good idea to go charging ahead though. Often in these games, enemies appear when you reach a certain point in each stage. It is in your best interest to advance the game as slowly as possible. This helps prevent enemies from swarming you. It's not perfect, but this strategy really does help you to bottleneck the bad guys. There's a surprisingly deep and economic aspect to recovery items in games like this. Most people blindly assume that the player with the lowest health should receive the pizza. This communistic approach reeks of flawed logic. I've literally witnessed players at the arcade race to the bottom to make sure that they are the weakest when the next pizza is coming up. Taken as a group, the players actually ended up with a net loss to their life as a result, which totally defeated the purpose of the pizza in the first place. Even if players aren't as selfish as in that anecdote, and to be fair, they usually aren't, it's still not always the best idea to give the weakest player the pizza. Let's say there are 4 turtles playing, and they come up on the pizza in stage 2. Who should get it? Leonardo is excellent at the game. He's still in his first life and missing only 1 health bar. He's in good shape, so he shouldn't take the pizza. Michelangelo is an abysmally bad player. He's already had to continue once and is on his last life of his second credit with only 1 health left. Even though Mike would recover the most life with the pizza, it's a bad idea to give it to him because he brings little to the team. The benefit of the pizza is diminished because he's just going to die off again quickly anyway. Donatello, characteristically, is playing it smart. He's still in his first life and he has 4 bars of health left, but he spends most of his time avoiding combat whenever possible. He gets more health back than Leo, but because he won't use it, he's still not a good choice. Raphael is on his first life and has 5 health bars remaining. He is as aggressive as Leo, but he's not quite as good a player. In this scenario, he's the best choice for the pizza. He will get good recovery, and his 5 health bars from the pizza buy more overall fighting power than you would get for any of the other 3 players. Assuming that you're playing with multiple players, be sure to work together. My sister and I were usually pretty good at this. Because I was the better player, I usually took it upon myself to handle the more difficult jobs. For example, during the Baxter Stockman fight in the sewer, he doesn't directly attack you at all. Instead, he just drops Mousers everywhere. I would volunteer to be on Mouser duty and put myself at risk so my sister could focus on Baxter himself worry-free. If you know your fellow players, you're likely already clued in to how they're going to behave in the game. But if you play with strangers, you have an extra wild card to contend with. It won't take long before you realize whether or not you're fighting alongside a team player. Hopefully you are, but if not, just remember there are only 2 kinds of people in the world: doormats and the people who step on them. If your compatriots don't want to help, to hell with them. Finally, and perhaps the most important pointer of all, you should always play these games as if you will die with the next hit you take. Think of how careful you are just before you lose the game. Few players are just as cautious with full health and lots of lives. If you always play with the utmost level of care, you will get much more out of your game. For whatever reason, it's difficult to sell people on this idea, but give it a try and watch your game rapidly improve. Graphically, the game is a good representation of its time. The sprites are large for an NES game, but few can be depicted on the screen at a time. Flicker is also an ever-present problem. Still, everything looks like it should. You can clearly identify every individual enemy, and you will never have trouble telling the turtles apart. Backgrounds are a little flat, and there's a lot of gray in this game, but for 1990, this is more than forgivable. The music is excellent and one of the best parts of the game. The theme song from the cartoon appears in many various remixes throughout the game, and it pumps you up every single time. There's some great original compositions in the game that help sell the settings quite well, and add some mood and theming to the game. Unfortunately, the sound effects are so-so at best. They get the job done, but very little more. There are comparatively few of them too, so they get repetitive quickly, and they aren't really that great to begin with. The gameplay is decent. Despite what many people say, in the NES adaptation, there is absolutely no difference beyond cosmetics in your choice of characters. The play control is super tight, and your turtle will always do exactly what you tell him to do. Unfortunately, with only 3 moves at your disposal, it can get a bit repetitive, but it's a small price to pay for such responsiveness. A. Jumps. B is your normal attack. While there are 2 different animations, they're functionally identical. Regular attacks deal 2 points of damage. If you press A to jump, then press B while aloft, you will perform a jump kick. This move brings you back to Earth diagonally and offers a good attack with great mobility. Jump kicks inflict 3 points of damage and are a very important part of boss fights. Finally, if you press A ever so slightly before B, such that you're almost pressing them simultaneously, you'll do your special attack. Unlike the arcade, all turtles do the same move here. It's a jumping weapon attack. It doles out 4 damage and is your bread and butter attack for most foot soldiers throughout the game. For whatever reason, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, the arcade game, has a reputation for being difficult, but honestly, I disagree. It's certainly not a cakewalk or anything, but it's not exactly Battletoads either. While I can't personally do it, it's entirely possible to beat this game without losing a life. Every mistake you make is just that, a mistake. The game is absolutely fair. While I did use the 10 life cheat code for this video, I've beaten the game without it. During my personal best run, I've only lost 2 lives, one at Krang and one at Shredder. As long as you're just not spamming the attack button, you'll probably be okay. You actually have to learn the attack patterns of the enemies and react accordingly. This game occupies an extremely strange position in terms of the TMNT video games. The first NES game was insanely difficult and really hasn't aged well. The Manhattan Project is a completely original NES game that improves upon this game in many ways. The second arcade game ended up on the Super NES as Turtles in Time, and to date, is considered the definitive TMNT game by most. It later inspired the Hyperstone Heist on the Genesis. This is by no means a bad game, but it is easily overshadowed by other games in the series. If you remember it fondly from your childhood, you'll likely still enjoy it today. I know I do. But if not, there's a good chance you'll pass this one up in favor of a later game.
Now for the difficult part. Is this game worth it? The going rate for this game is $15. As mentioned, the game is inferior to 3 similar sequels, but the price also reflects that. Furthermore, it's really the only way to play this game outside of owning the arcade board, since the Xbox Live Arcade download has since been pulled. On the one hand, 15 might seem a little steep, but at 25 cents a game, this makes 60 games your break-even point. I know I've played more than 60 credits worth of this game over the years. The game delivers on everything you want a TMNT game to do. You get to play as your favorite turtle, you get to send lots of the Foot Clan to the scrap heap, and you get to eat a lot of pizza while you do it. In that regard, it is definitely a success. Thanks for watching.